Well, again, I'm Matt, and I'm the pastor here at Village, and just want to say it's a privilege to be here with you this morning as we celebrate 3 years of being a church together. So far in our service, we've kind of looked at the past, as Madeline shared. Luke kind of brought us the present of like where we are today as a church, and what I want to focus my time on today is kind of focusing on the future of where I see Village going over this next year, what our vision is for this next year. And so this sermon is going to look a little different. Usually we take a text and we dive right into it and really explain it and see what it means for us. But today we're going to be more focusing on heart. Just like what I believe God has for us this year. Like what I sense He wants us to be focusing our time on doing. But before we get to that, I just want to, as Luke did, just thank you. A church, as Luke said, is the people in it. And I just am so appreciative of all that you do for our church, from helping out with Village Kids to stacking chairs to all the things that go into actually setting this up. It's not something that Luke and I could do on our own, and from hosting countless meals to having people in your homes and just all the ways that you go above and beyond and serve. I just want to, as one of your pastors, just thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you do, for all the things you do that no one else sees, and just want to make sure that you know that you are loved, and we appreciate all you do for us as a church together and supporting one another. But today, again, I just want to kind of focus on what I believe, what I'm sensing, what I've been praying over for what God has for our church in this upcoming year. And so if you know much about me, if you've been around Village for any time, or if you had any conversations, you'll know that through and through, I am a history nerd. I love history podcasts. I love listening to historical fiction. The dorkier the book, the better. I love watching history movies. I drink deep from the Kool-Aid. I am a history nerd. And one of the fascinating things I learned, I'd say probably one of the most fascinating things I learned over this last year or two about history was something that happened in England during World War II. It's kind of just actually about the population of England during that time. And so here's the fact, is that the nation of England, the English people, were happier, they're reported being happier during World War II than after. Isn't that pretty bizarre? That the nation of England, the people in that country were actually happier during the war, within the uncertainty of war, within the carnage of war, they're happier during that time than after the war. I mean, isn't that bizarre? And I don't think they're happier because of, obviously not the tragedy of war, the heartache of war, the brutality of war. But I think, the reason that they were happier is because they had this greater cause to be a part of war. They had to set aside their individual passions and pursuits and desires to serve a cause that was greater than themselves. And so it forced them to come together as a nation, as a people, to do something that was greater than themselves, to be a part of something that was greater than any individual in the nation. And I think what is true of them is also true of us today, that everyone in this room, everyone in this world, we have been created with this longing. This longing to be a part of something that's bigger than ourselves. All of us long to be a part of something that's actually worth sacrificing ourselves for, actually worth sacrificing our free time, our resources. We long to be a part of something that we can actually care so much about, that's even worth setting aside our individual preferences for. All of us have that longing. And when I look at Scripture, the beautiful thing is that God, He calls us to that. He calls us to be a part of His mission. And when we look at the Bible storyline, we see right from the beginning that the very first humans, Adam and Eve, when God created him, it wasn't long until they rebelled against Him. And obviously at that point, God could have destroyed them. He could have wiped them out as easily as we wipe away cobwebs. But He didn't. He intentionally didn't. And instead, right from the beginning, He set this plan in motion that we see all throughout the storyline of Scripture. He set this plan in motion to redeem them. And so what that means, is that the ultimate purpose of human history is the redemption of humanity. Now, there's no higher cause, there's no greater end than in human history in our lives than being a part of the ultimate redemption of humanity. And it's beautiful that like in scripture like that, like, God calls us to be a part of it. Like I love like the Lord of the Rings story, and like when I hear that like Frodo is invited by Gandalf to be a part of this incredible mission, it's just this thing when I read it that like, I'm like, man, I want that for my life. And yet like God invites us to be a part of even something bigger. Like he invites us to be a part of his grand plan. He invites us to be participants, to have an active role in his mission. Let me just read for you like one passage. I mean, there's so many where he invites us to, but just one of the passages where he invites us to be part of his mission. He says in 2 Corinthians 5, verses 18 through 19, he says, all this is from God, who, what God has done, he's reconciled us to himself through Christ, and gave us, so God has given us this ministry of reconciliation. That God was reconciling the world to himself through Christ, not counting people's sins against them, and he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. And so what that passage is saying is that, like, God, like, he is working in and through us for his mission. Like, if you've ever longed to have, like, a purpose bigger than yourself, God is saying, like, he is inviting every single person in this room, every single person in this world to be part of this huge cause. Like, what could be a bigger privilege? And I think like we hear that and we can easily just like let that pass us by, but I just want to let that sink in for a second. That the greatest cause of all history, like you are being invited to join in on that. And so what I want to focus on today real briefly is just like what I believe God is calling us to together live that out for us here in Ukrainian Village. Because to be honest, there's been seasons in the life of our church where I know like we're to live out this mission together, and I know that we're to live it out here in Westtown, but I don't necessarily have a conviction of, where specifically in Westtown, we're supposed to live that out. Even last year, actually, during our anniversary celebration, like that was one of our prayers. If you were here, you'll remember that. If not, like, this has actually been one of our prayers for this entire last year of like, God, like just, make it clear to us like where we should together as a church, corporately invest our time, resources, and talents. Of course, like, we should do that in so many places, but like one of the questions is like, where do we do that together as a church body? And what I'm so excited to share today is I feel like God has made that really clear to us. And he's made it really clear like where we should invest our time together. And where I believe God is calling us as a church to invest is right here in Columbus Elementary School. And let me just kind of share why I feel like I'm getting that sense that God is calling us to invest right here. First off is like when last year when we had that prayer during our vision service last year, during our 2-year anniversary, like moving wasn't even on the radar for us. We weren't even planning on moving, and so like Columbus Elementary was kind of the last place that we would have thought to serve in our community. But then, over the course of the year, we began sensing that like we needed to move to morning service from evening, as Madeline shared. And during that time, like as we looked through places, like, it would have been like beyond our wildest expectations to not only find a place where we could meet in the morning that was in the neighborhood, but to also find a place where we could meet that we could have that also be our mission. That was like way beyond what I was thinking. And yet, like as we've come here, more and more doors have opened to serve here. So I'm going to share just kind of the first door that I noticed. It came during the strike, actually, during the CPS strike. I was talking with Lauren, and it was the day after the first day of the strike, and she's like, you should probably like go out there with the teachers. You probably should like actually talk to the teachers. Like you're not going to get a better opportunity to actually meet the teachers and to support them than actually going out there and chatting with them on the strike line and bringing them some food or something. And so with her suggestion, Luke and I, we made some oatmeal, grabbed some toppings from Mariana's, and we went over there and we were talking to the teachers on the strike line and serving them some warm meal when they were outside. And as I was talking to one of them, she came through the line. I said, hey, we're so happy to serve you, but just know that we'd also be happy to serve you during during the school year, happy to serve your students. And I was expecting her at that moment to say something back I'll think about that, or yeah, maybe you could do this one-time coat drive or backpack drive of really nothing of substance. But what she said to me was, we should start a weekly reading buddies program. And I remember just being kind of taken back of I was just kind of thinking of maybe serving once a month or something, but you were already telling me you had an actual plan in your mind of some way that we could truly be a part of this community. And I was just like blown away by that. Of like, oh man, like maybe this is, where God's calling us to serve. But the second thing that's happened that like really like confirmed this for me was like I was having a meeting with the principal about like talking about like what were the different ways that we could serve, and we've been looking into that together. And one of the ways that we talked about together was that we were going to next Sunday, as we talk about our value of neighborhood. We're in this series right now of looking at our core values. We're kind of taking a break from that today, but next service we're looking at the value of neighborhood. And instead of like just having a long sermon about the neighborhood, we're actually going to live at that value together. And we're going to serve the school and do a bunch of like projects within the school that the principal is wanting to get done. But as I emailed her to follow up with her on that conversation, I said, hey, would Sunday, January 19th work for you to do this service day at your school? And listen to how she replied. She said, January 19th does work for me, and if you're open to it, I'd like to invite the Columbus staff and community to join your congregation in this. And at this point, like when I read this email, I had to like do a double take. Like my heart kind of dropped, and like I couldn't even respond that day. Like it was just too much. I just couldn't handle it. It's like it was like like the sacred pastor email, like you just never expect to get. And I was just like blown away. And then she said, I thought this would be helpful for you for building relationships for your congregation. What do you think? I was like, yep, I agree. That sounds awesome. Like that will work for us. And so right away, I called Lauren. I was just like flabbergasted. I'm like, man, this is like so much more than I could have ever imagined doing. Like even if I was a principal, like I wouldn't let church in that quickly and into like interacting with my families. I'd want to like really get to know them, get to know their character. But I'm like, man, she's just putting herself out there for us. And Ephesians 3:20 reads, now to him who can do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. It's a verse that I share pretty often after the service. And I just love that verse because that's like what God does. Constantly like when we think about like what we want to see God do in this church, like I set like the floor, and God just kind of always breaks through that floor, does way more. Because like for all of us, like we think of what God might be able to do, and we don't want to like set the bar too high because we don't want to be disappointed. But like we worship a God who like Scripture says can do immeasurably more than we ask or imagine. And why I feel so confident that like God is leading us to be investing together corporately here in in Columbus Elementary. Because I feel like God is already doing immeasurably more than I would have asked or imagined for him to do. But as we think about like us as a church serving here together, like it can't just be Luke and I serving here, or it can't just be like Luke and I and a few volunteers serving here, because what we really need is like without you, we can't discover all that God has for us. I just want to say again real quick, like without you, the people in this room, we can't really discover all that God has for us in this partnership. Think back real quickly to that conversation I had with the principal and with the other teacher. The only reason that like I found out like what God had for us is because I was present there and I asked. And I don't say that like in any way to like praise myself. Like I was definitely nervous in even asking that question, but like I asked a question and then God did way more with it. And that's kind of like how God works. He takes us, he calls us to be a part of his mission, but then like when we're obedient, even like with our knees and boots shaking, like he does so much more with them than we could ask or imagine. And he says in 2 Corinthians 5:20, we are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. I love that line, like God is making his appeal through us, like God is working through us. And so what that means is that like, if we're going to find out that all that God has for us in this partnership with Columbus, there's something special that's going to happen when you have a relationship with a staff member, or when you have a relationship with a student or a parent. Like it's going to be something that, none of us will else be able to experience. There's going to be something unique when you bring your unique talents to helping this school that like something that I could never bring to the table. And it's only like when all of us are serving together that we're going to truly see that all that God has for us. There's this quote that I heard this week that I really liked. It's actually a quote about coaching, but I think it just fits so much of life. And here's the quote. It says, kind of the goal of coaching. That coaching is getting people to do what they don't want to do in order to accomplish what they do want to accomplish. And so I think think about this just first off for life. Like, it applies to so many things. Think of New Year's resolutions. Everyone wants to accomplish their New Year's resolution. That's why they made it. But the reason why pretty much none of us do is because in order to accomplish our New Year's resolutions, we have to do things we don't want to do. And that's the whole challenge of it. That's like kind of the challenge of some things in life is that, like, in order to accomplish the things we want to accomplish, we're going to have to do things we don't want to do. We're going to have to actually, work when we don't want to work. We're going to have to, wake up when we don't want to wake up. We have to do things we don't want to do in order to accomplish the things we do want to accomplish. And so as we think about, this partnership with Columbus, I'm convinced that there's not one person in this room who doesn't like that idea, who's not saying yeah, of course we want to see Columbus families here. Of course we want to hear those stories of how God got into a marriage that was struggling or a person that was struggling and gave them hope and restored this family or restored a marriage from a Columbus family. Of course, everyone wants to hear those stories. I want to hear those stories. But just when I was talking to that Columbus teacher, I don't necessarily want to, I want to do less and have God do more. I didn't want, I personally wanted to do a monthly service opportunity, and the teacher was asking us to do a weekly service program, and I'm that's a little more than I was thinking. But the fruit of that at the same time, of weekly being with students, of weekly getting to know their lives and getting to know their parents through that, and in the relationship with the teachers and everything, that's when we're putting ourselves in that position for God to do more than we can ask or imagine. And so I just want to kind of give you quickly 2 reasons why I feel why it's worth it to do the work that we don't want to do. Because I think all of us would love to be able to celebrate what God has done through this partnership, but we want to celebrate what other people have done while we kind of sat on the sidelines and watched others do work. But let me kind of give you 2 reasons why again. And the first one is where I just mentioned already, is that it's only through what you do, it's only through your work that we're going to see that all that God has us, for this partnership. Because you bring something unique to the table that I don't have, and I bring something unique to the table that you don't have. And you're going to have a unique relationship with a student or a teacher that none of us will have. And when we share those together, we get to see all that God is having us do through this partnership. But the second one, I think, is even the bigger reason. Going back to my opening illustration of the country of England, of how they were the happiest when they were sacrificing together. Of course, no one would choose to make those sacrifices apart from this big cause. But it was only because they sacrificed that they experienced that happiness and that joy afterwards of being a part of something. And it's the same thing for the mission of God. We can come to church, and it's a good thing. It's good for our souls. It's good for us to be renewed and hear God's word. But coming to church alone isn't fully being a part of God's mission. You're not going to get that sense of the joy of sacrificing this mission just by showing up somewhere. Truly to get that joy, we have to set things aside. We have to make sacrifices in order to experience that joy of feeling we were a part of something greater than ourselves. Because if we literally just do things based on what is most pleasing to us, what is most convenient for us in that moment, then we're never going to make any sacrifices for something. So I just want to encourage you to just even maybe even ask the question, maybe it wasn't on your radar, maybe even just ask the question of what would it look like for me to, give up, a little bit of free time, throughout the month to be a part of this partnership, to serve this school. What would it be a part of? What would it look like for me if I actually gave up a day of work? Maybe work has a volunteer program, or I gave up, an hour of work to serve some of the students here. I wonder what God would even do in your own life, the joy that you could experience from being a part of his mission. So I've said a lot of hopefully here of why we should serve, but next I just want to real quickly share how we can serve. And so when I met with the principal, there's just so many awesome ideas that she came up with, we came up with, and I just want to kind of share some of those. So as already mentioned, one of them is reading buddies. I've been emailing that one teacher back and forth now, and we're trying to set up a day for us to meet where we can have this weekly reading buddies program, during the school year. And what a cool opportunity to truly serve the teachers. Their whole department is excited about us serving their students, and I can't imagine what God is going to do through that. I hope all of you will be here next Sunday. So we're going to have a serve day where, again, the Columbus staff the families are going to be right here with us, and we're going to have a short service, and then we're going to do work projects right alongside the principal and serve them together. The opportunity that I'm the most excited about is they said they didn't have a soccer coach, and so I'm going to coach their soccer team in the fall. And then, man, I'm just so excited, get some of those kids to come to our village soccer camp. But maybe you, if you have free time, maybe you're like, man, I could be the assistant coach. If you ever played youth soccer, you know that there has to be oranges at halftime. Maybe you could bring it at our 6 games, some oranges for halftime. The options are endless. Luke's going to be redoing their website. If you've seen their website, you'll know that it needs a little bit of help. And if you're website savvy at all, you could help out Luke with that. We're going to have a career fair there at some point here where we're just going to share from our congregation, all the different careers we have with the students. And so, if you would be willing, that'd be a great opportunity to share about your unique career, as some of the students can even have a better idea of what that kind of a job might look like. And really, the sky's the limit. And so, this week at community groups, part of group is going to be, helping you to discover what uniquely you could bring to the table of ways you could serve this school. So as we end here, I just want to take this last moment to just reflect on what would it look like? What would it look like if we all did truly step up and serve? If we stepped up to do what we didn't want to do to accomplish something that we wanted to accomplish? What could God do through that? Could we have a number of Columbus students in our Village Kids program? Could we have a number of those kids coming to our soccer camp each year? Could we, have worshiping on Sunday mornings right alongside Village family or Columbus families? I don't know what God could do, but I know that He can do, as He says in His Word, more than we can ask or imagine. And so as we celebrate this year, our 30th anniversary, there's so many things, as I've already been mentioned, that we get to celebrate. But I wonder next year what even more we could be celebrating of what God did through this partnership as we serve Him. And so I'm going to invite now Jeanette to pray over this partnership and to pray over Columbus and the students and the families. And we just want to just pray God's blessing. Jesus, in Mark 10, it says that He came not to be served, but to serve. And that's really our heart for this partnership. I just want to throw out there, we're coming in with no agenda. We just want to serve and love and see what God has to do in it. So I want to invite Jeanette here to pray.
Well, if you bow your heads with me. Lord, I thank you so much for the countless opportunities you've given us to just serve our community, Lord. 3 years of celebrations, Lord, of soccer camps and Easter egg hunts, Lord, and every conversation we've had with people in this community and hearing what their needs are, Lord. I thank you so much that you gave us a vision 3 years ago to be fully satisfied in you, Lord. And I pray that in this year and next Sunday, Lord, and in your ministry to Columbus, Lord, that satisfaction be just a light, Lord. May it be such a fire in us, a conviction in us to do your work, Lord, to be part of your work, Lord. I pray that we create strong relationships here, Lord, that we're able to bless these teachers, Lord, that we're able to bless these kids, Lord, and that you just bless our hands next Sunday and throughout this entire year, Lord. In your name I pray. Amen.